The session musicians were checking their watches. Studio B at Sun Records, Memphis, Tennessee, November 1955. Three men who'd played on dozens of recordings that week, all thinking the same thing. Another nervous kid with a guitar. Another 3-hour waste of studio time. The bass player, Luther Perkins, tapped ash from his cigarette into an empty coffee cup. The drummer, Marshall Grant, was already calculating how many real sessions they'd miss for this one. And Sam Phillips, the man who owned Sun Records, sat in the control booth with his arms crossed, trying to remember why he'd agreed to this audition. Then, Johnny Cash opened his mouth, and for 47 seconds after the song ended, nobody in that room could breathe. But nobody knew that yet. Sam Phillips had discovered Elvis Presley a year earlier. Found him in this same studio, the same small room with water-stained ceiling tiles and carpet that smelled like decades of cigarette smoke and spilled bourbon. Elvis had changed everything. Changed music, changed culture, changed Sam's life. Now Sam was chasing that feeling again. That moment when you hear something and know instantly that the world just shifted. He'd auditioned 67 singers since Elvis left for RCA. 67 hopefuls who walked in thinking they were the next big thing. 67 disappointing afternoons. Number 68 was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Name on the appointment sheet, J.R. Cash, age 23, from Dyess, Arkansas. No recording experience, no professional performances, just a kid who'd called the studio 3 times until Sam's secretary finally gave him a slot. Probably another Elvis wannabe. Sam said to his engineer that morning. They all want to wiggle their hips and sound dangerous now. Want me to cancel it? The engineer asked. Sam thought about it, considered the pile of actual work waiting, the mixing sessions, the contracts, the phone calls to radio stations. No, he said finally. Let him come in, but keep it short. At 1:47 p.m., Johnny Cash walked through the studio door. He was tall, too thin, wearing a cheap suit that looked borrowed. His shoes were old but polished. His hair was slicked back with too much pomade. He carried a guitar case covered in road dust. Luther and Marshall were already set up. They'd learned to position themselves efficiently for these auditions. Close enough to hear, far enough to not get invested. They'd become experts at looking interested while counting the minutes until they could leave. Mr. Phillips? Johnny's voice was quiet, almost a rasp. Sam looked up from the paperwork. You're early. Yes, sir. Didn't want to be late. Where'd you drive from? Memphis. Well, I live in Memphis now, working at a garage, but I'm from Arkansas originally. Sam studied him. The kid was nervous, but not in the usual way. Most nervous singers talked too much, over-explained, tried to sell themselves. This one just stood there, holding his guitar case, waiting. You know this might not go anywhere, Sam said. Not cruel, just honest. Most don't. Yes, sir, I understand. Why do you want to record? Johnny was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was even softer. I have songs in my head. Been there a long time. Need to get them out. It wasn't the answer Sam expected. Not, I want to be famous, or I'm really talented, or any of the rehearsed speeches he usually heard. Just simple, direct. All right, Sam said. Set up. Let's hear what you've got. Johnny opened his case. The guitar inside was old, scratched, the kind you bought second-hand and played until it fell apart. He positioned himself in front of the microphone, adjusted the height, tested a few chords. His fingers moved carefully, precisely, like someone who'd spent thousands of hours alone with that instrument. Luther glanced at Marshall. They'd developed a silent communication system for these sessions. The look said, "This'll be over in 20 minutes." What are you going to sing? Sam asked from the booth. Folsom Prison Blues. Original? Yes, sir. Wrote it myself. What's it about? Man in prison, listening to a train, wishing he was free. Sam leaned forward slightly. Prison songs were everywhere in country music. Hank Williams had done them. Jimmy Rogers had done them. Everyone had done them. But something in the way Johnny said it, that flat, matter-of-fact delivery, caught his attention. "Ever been to prison?" Sam asked. "No, sir, but I've been other kinds of trapped." The studio went quiet. Even Luther looked up from his bass. "All right," Sam said. "Whenever you're ready." Johnny positioned himself closer to the microphone, closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had changed. His posture was different, heavier somehow, like he'd put on weight that nobody else could see. What happened next would be discussed in music studios for the next 70 years. Johnny's right hand moved across the guitar strings. Not a strum exactly, more like a march. Boom, chicka boom. A rhythm that sounded like a train on tracks. Simple, hypnotic, relentless. Then he started singing. "I hear the train a-comin', it's rollin' round the bend." The voice that came out was unlike anything Sam Phillips had heard. It wasn't high and bright like most country singers. It wasn't trying to sound pretty. It was deep, dark, resonant, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. But more than the sound, it was the feeling. Johnny wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was somewhere else entirely. Inside the song, inside the prison, inside the trapped man's head. "And I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when." Luther's hands stopped moving on his bass. He just held the neck, frozen, listening. Marshall's drumsticks hovered above the snare, forgotten. In the control booth, Sam Phillips leaned forward until his forehead almost touched the glass. "I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on." There was no vibrato, no showing off, no technical flourishes. Just pure, unfiltered emotion delivered in a voice that sounded like it had lived 100 hard years. Johnny was 23 years old, had never been to prison, had barely traveled outside Arkansas. But when he sang those words, every person in that room believed he'd done time. But that train keeps a-rollin' on down to San Antone. The guitar continued its train rhythm. Boom, chicka-boom, relentless, unstoppable, like fate itself. Sam's hands were gripping the edge of the mixing board. His engineer had stopped taking notes. The sound waves on the tape machine looked like heartbeats. This was it. The thing Sam had been searching for, not another Elvis. Something completely different, something older, something that felt like it had always existed and was just now being discovered. Johnny sang about shooting a man in Reno just to watch him die, sang about whistleblowing and drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, sang about freedom and imprisonment and the unbearable weight of time. His eyes were closed, his face showed nothing, but his voice carried everything. When the final chord faded, Johnny opened his eyes, and nobody moved. The tape reels continued turning in the booth, recording silence. The afternoon sun came through the studio's high windows, catching dust particles that hung motionless in the air. Luther's cigarette had burned down to his fingers, but he didn't seem to notice. 5 seconds of silence. 10 seconds. 15. Johnny stood at the microphone, guitar still in position, waiting for someone to say something. Anything. His face betrayed nothing, but his knuckles were white on the guitar neck. 20 seconds. 25. In the control booth, Sam Phillips's eyes were wet. He wasn't sobbing, wasn't making a sound, but tears were running down his face, and he didn't wipe them away. 30 seconds of absolute silence. The engineer looked at Sam, uncertain. Should he say something? Should he stop the tape? 35 seconds. Marshall finally moved, lowering his drumstick slowly, like he was afraid any sudden motion would break whatever spell had been cast. 40 seconds. Luther stubbed out his cigarette. His hands were shaking. 45 seconds. Sam Phillips stood up in the booth. His voice came through the speaker into the studio, and it was thick, rough, barely controlled. "That's it," he said. Johnny looked up at the booth, confused. "Sir? That's the sound I've been looking for." Johnny didn't understand. "You want me to sing it again? I can do it different if—" "No." Sam's voice was firm now. "Don't change a single thing. That was perfect. That was—" He stopped, searching for words. "That was the most honest thing I've ever heard." 47 seconds. That's how long the silence had lasted. Later, when journalists asked Sam Phillips about discovering Johnny Cash, he always mentioned those 47 seconds. Called them the longest and shortest 47 seconds of his life. Luther finally spoke. "How did you do that?" Johnny looked at him. "Do what?" "Make us all forget where we were. I was in that prison with you. I heard that train. I felt—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Marshall nodded. "I've been playing sessions for 8 years. I've never felt anything like that." Johnny didn't know what to say. He'd been singing that song in his head for months, singing it alone in his car on the way to work, singing it in the shower, singing it quietly at night when he couldn't sleep. He'd lived with it so long, it didn't occur to him that other people might actually feel what he felt. Sam came out of the booth. He walked directly to Johnny and put his hand on his shoulder. "We're recording you," Sam said. "We're making a record. Today. Right now." "Today?" Johnny's voice was uncertain. "Don't you want to hear more songs first? Don't you want to—" "I don't need to hear anything else. That song right there is going to change your life. It's going to change a lot of lives." "But I'm not trained. I don't have a band. I don't—" Sam cut him off. "You have something better than training. You have truth. That's rarer than talent. That's rarer than anything." For the next 3 hours, they recorded Folsom Prison Blues 3 more times, along with 2 other songs Johnny had written. By 6 p.m., they had the master recording that would launch Johnny Cash's career. But it was that first take, that first performance, that became legend. Sam Phillips kept the tape, played it for every new artist he signed. "This," he'd say, "is what I'm looking for. Not perfection, truth." Luther Perkins and Marshall Grant quit their other session work. They became Johnny Cash's backing band, the Tennessee Two, and never played for anyone else again. Years later, in an interview, Luther was asked why. "That first day at Sun Records," Luther said, "I was just trying to get through another session. Then Johnny started singing, and I realized I'd been waiting my whole life to hear that voice. Some people spend their entire careers searching for something that matters. I found it in 3 minutes and 29 seconds. Marshall added, "We were professional musicians. We'd heard great singers, but Johnny wasn't just singing. He was letting us see inside him. That's different. That changes you." The session musicians who were supposed to be bored, who were watching the clock, who thought this was just another waste of time, ended up dedicating their lives to the man they'd almost dismissed. Sam Phillips later said that November afternoon was the second most important day in Sun Records history. First was Elvis. Second was Johnny Cash. But if someone pressed him, made him really think about it, he'd sometimes admit that Johnny's session affected him more deeply. "Elvis was lightning," Sam said in a 1987 interview. "Explosive, revolutionary, electric. But Johnny was something else. Johnny was gravity. You didn't see him coming. You just suddenly realized you couldn't escape his pull. That first time he sang Folsom Prison Blues, I felt like I was falling. 47 seconds of silence after that song, and I was still falling." The recording was released in December 1955. It didn't become a massive hit immediately. Radio stations weren't sure what to do with it. It was too dark for pop, too raw for traditional country, too honest for comfortable listening. But people found it anyway. Prisoners requested it, truck drivers played it, Night shift workers listened to it. People who felt trapped in their lives, trapped in their marriages, trapped in their towns, heard Johnny Cash singing about being trapped in Folsom Prison, and they understood. Within a year, Johnny Cash was a name. Within 2 years, he was a star. Within 5 years, he was a legend. But for the rest of his life, Johnny Cash remembered that afternoon at Sun Records differently than everyone else. He remembered being nervous, remembered feeling like he might throw up, remembered the 47 seconds of silence and thinking he'd failed, that nobody liked it, that he should pack his guitar and go back to the garage. In 1993, a journalist asked Johnny about that first recording session. "I thought I'd done something wrong," Johnny said. "The silence after I finished, I thought they hated it. I thought Sam was trying to figure out how to tell me politely that I should find another dream." What would you have done if he'd said that? Johnny was quiet for a long moment. "Probably kept singing anyway, in my car, in the shower. Couldn't have stopped if I'd wanted to. The songs were already there." That's the thing about real artists. They don't create because they want to be famous. They create because not creating would kill them. Johnny Cash would have sung those songs if no one ever heard them. The world was just lucky that Sam Phillips heard them first. The original master tape of that first take still exists. It's been digitally preserved, studied by musicologists, analyzed for its technical qualities. But nobody who listens to it can quite explain why it works so well. The production is simple. The performance is raw. There are no tricks, no effects, no studio magic. There's just a voice, a guitar, and a truth so pure that 47 seconds of silence was the only appropriate response. Have you ever heard something so honest it made you forget how to speak? That's what happened in Studio B at Sun Records in November 1955. A 23-year-old kid from Arkansas walked in carrying a dusty guitar case. 3 hours later, he walked out as Johnny Cash. The session musicians stopped checking their watches. Sam Phillips stopped searching for the next Elvis. And the world got the voice it had been waiting for, even if it didn't know it yet. Sometimes genius doesn't announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it just walks quietly into a room, picks up a guitar, and tells the truth. And sometimes, when the truth is that pure, the only response is silence.